Today's scripture lesson comes to us from the book of Job and the Hebrew Bible. I'll be reading from chapter 38, verses 1 through 7, and then skipping forward to the end of that chapter, 34 through 41. Here are these words. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Who is this that darkens the counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man, and I will question you, and you shall declare to me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding. Who determined its measurement? Surely you know. Or who stretched out the line of it? On what was its bases sunk? Or were you there when they laid the cornerstone, when the morning stars sang together and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy? Now I'm going to skip forward to 34. Can you lift up your voice to the clouds so the floods of water may cover you? Can you send forth the lightning so that it may go forth and say to you, here we are? Who has put wisdom in the innermost parts, or given understanding to the mind? Who has the wisdom to number the clouds, or to lift the tilt of the waterskins of heaven? And when the dust runs into a mass and the clods cling together, can you hunt the prey of the lion to satisfy the appetite of the young lions? When they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in their covert, who provides for the raven its prey when its young ones cry out to God and wander about for lack of food? If you ask most Christians to survey what is the oldest book in the Bible, they'll say, well, Genesis, because that's where it all starts. And they would be completely wrong. The Bible is not a chronological document. It doesn't start with the oldest and move to the newest. It's not that way in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. It's not that way in the New Testament either. The oldest book in the New Testament are the books of Paul. And the newest book in the New Testament wins the prize for being at the end, the book of Revelations. But for the most part, all the books of the Bible are just put in whatever order the people who were editors decided to put it in. The Genesis story is first not because it's chronologically older, but because it gives a sample of the majesty of God in the creation of the world. And it's also I want you to understand that it's not a book that's set for literally things happen in this way. There is majesty, there is illusion, there's allegory, they're all part of it. So I'm going to tell you that the oldest book of the Bible is about a guy named Job, who probably never really existed. It's an allegory of the life of what it is to live in God's presence and what were some of the driving questions that people were asking theologically about God. And so I used to hate the book of Job. I would read it because it's just part of my Bible reading. I just go through it and get from one end to the other and go, got that one off the list, check. But as I've gotten older, I've begun to appreciate it more and more because it really shows us what the dynamics of life are. Here's a person who's stricken by nothing that he's done himself. And in fact, he just sits in an ash heap because he's lost everything he's owned. He's lost his family, he's lost his health, he's lost lots of things. And I have met through my life, being a pastor and just living in the world, that I have met people who have lost a lot of things. And the grief that they go through, and how do they put it together? Because it's like, cancer was nothing I asked for, or this illness was nothing I got, or I lost this job, it had nothing to do with me, it was just a layoff, but I was the number that came up. And often we have to respond to things that happen in life that we have had happen to us, that we had played no part in that coming to us. Now, from the beginning of Job to the point where God shows up, it is a gripe fest. people are saying, well, you did this, that's why this happened to you. And Job's going, I didn't do that, that's why it's happened to me. And they go back and forth and round, and there's a ton of sarcasm in there. Surely the sun rises and falls on your great insight, he says to one of the people who's trying to justify Job's being in his ash heap. Then all of a sudden, you get, after three friends, and then a fourth show up to tell Job he's just an idiot and that he's done something wrong in his life. God shows up. And the interesting thing about God showing up in this text is that God does not address any of the complaints of Job. Doesn't address what happened to his family, doesn't address what happened to all of his livestock, doesn't address to his health degrading, any of that. He just doesn't say any of that. But God goes right into talking about, so you're so smart, let's do a little test. And says, well, gird yourself up, because I'm going to ask you some questions now, bud. And then asks, were you there when you laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, how did the stars end up in the sky? Tell me about the weather. Where does it come from and where does it go? I think that's the most interesting one to me, because here we are, 21st century. We don't have any concept of what's going to happen in the next 2 months of weather. Someone will make a prediction. This last week, I was looking at, because I'm interested if it's going to rain in Southern California or not, 5 different long-range forecasts. None of them agreed with one another. They were all like, no rain, lots of rain, some may have rain, could be this way, could be cold, could be warm, I could be a meteorologist at that rate. It's not like they're giving me probabilities, and maybe some are more probable than other. But really, think about it. We don't really there's a lot of the world that we live in, natural or otherwise, that we have no idea when it's coming or what it will do. Talk to the people who've just suffered through 2 hurricanes in Florida and North Carolina. It was supposed to move this way, it moved right this way, and we got hit. Or it was supposed to come to us, and it moved this way, and we didn't get hit. And so we sing the praises of God because we didn't get hit. But what about the people who did? And so this idea that God shows up and does these and questions Job about what it is to be God, which I find really interesting. What is it to be God? What is it to be the all-creative power of the universe? What is it to have all of this in your power? And basically, God says, I'm God, I can do what I want to do, and you're a human, you won't understand what I'm trying to do here. But the end result is 2 things. One, Job realizes he's outmatched by God all of a sudden and goes, whoa, I guess my complaints are kind of unfounded when I'm confronted with this greater reality than myself. The other thing is that when God shows up, God is revealed, but it isn't because God is absent prior to that. It's just God is revealed to Job. I think a lot of people have kind of given up on the idea of God in creation, they talk about it in broad terms, that not that God is personally involved, but just God has made the world and the universe, and it's so ethereal and it's so far out there that it's easy to be an agnostic and aspire to it. It's like, oh, yeah, what a beautiful day, what God did here. The difference is between people who claim a faith, it doesn't matter what faith they claim. We could be talking about a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Jew, a follower of Islam, a Christian. People who claim a faith believe that God is a little deeper involved in the reality of the world. Now, it can vary a lot. It can be that a person has a real concrete sense of God's reality in the world and may be praying down the road of what type of peaches to buy. It can get that deep. Or it could be someone who just knows that the reality of the cosmos is undergirded by God's presence, and that's enough for them to worship and be faithful and be a part of a community and to be transforming the world around them because they have been engaged by this great creative force. We as Christians go another step, don't we? We say the reality of God comes to us in the life and words of Jesus Christ. We look at Jesus as a reflection of God's reality in the world. The idea that God's love is everlasting, that God's love is attainable to us humans, that we have a part to play in the world, that God is working to heal the world, and that words make a difference and actions play out as far as God's reality around us. We are, I would say, lucky in a lot of ways because we can point to an individual and say, that's what God is like in the world. Other religions don't have that. You know, they aspire to God in a different way. And that's not to say that ours is right and theirs is wrong, but they aspire to God in a different way. And we aspire to God in a particular way. When looking at this text, for me it's easy to kind of come back with Christian eyes and say, okay, I get this now and I'm going to look at Jesus to make it a reality for myself. But I do try to just stay with the context of the text itself and not apply Jesus as an overlay on everything. The importance of this text, I think, to the Jewish people, and remember, this is the earliest text, probably, of the Jewish people, is that it says that God's majesty and presence is there all the time, but can be revealed in specific times. And because of that as a foundation of the Hebrew Bible, it's out of that we see Moses arrive, the prophets arrive, the action of God being done throughout history. It's a blueprint of how God interacts with human beings and how God's message comes across to people and how that can be transformative as well as judgmental. It can hold people accountable to the things they're supposed to do as far as God is concerned. Too often, the world thinks God is absent. That because they don't see that action the way they want to see it. They prayed really hard for the person and thought good thoughts about the person, but they still died and they feel let down. And I'm not going to say that you shouldn't feel let down. It's a total letdown. But there's a tendency in our reality of thinking about God as we think about God as a Santa Claus, that God's out there to kind of give us presents periodically and to set things right for ourselves so we don't have to deal with the ups and downs of living. We don't have to deal with the tragedy as well as the things that happen that have no explanation. And the book of Job is a great example that people live through that all the time. That even the fairy tale ending of Job, where he gets everything back, like he gets more children, he gets all his livestock back, he lives a long life. To me, the book doesn't even need that. It's enough to say that God is present with Job, and that even if we say that Job got it all back, he still has the memory of all the tragedy that befell him. It doesn't erase it all. It's just part of living. When I was 26 years old, my father died, and it took me a long time to get over it. A lot of the things that I had hoped for us, for him and I, just didn't happen because he was gone and I was here. And the thing that was interesting for me about my father's death is that my brother-in-laws were probably closer to my father the years leading up to it than me, because they had more in common with my father than I did. I got educated, I guess, and moved off and had different interests. My dad was proud of me and it was involved with my life all the way to the end, and I was proud of him for all that he did and was accomplished as well. But God showed up for me with him in remarkable ways. I prayed fervently that his leukemia would go away. It didn't. Watched him digress and become less and less of a physical human being over time until he was gone. My brothers-in-law have had him visit them spiritually, which is interesting to me because neither one of them would call themselves spiritual people. I'm a spiritual person. Dad hasn't visited me at all. Maybe it's enough to know that God shows up and is a part of one's life as we journey all the way through. Maybe I didn't need this apparition or the sense of presence to continue down the road, to see that the world is a good place, to see that people are involved and that we are all a part of God's great river of joy and love, and that we rely on one another through it. Things come back to us over time. Even those things that happen to us that cause us to stumble or fall or face deep regret or disappointment, life comes back to us, even to the point where our last breath is given and we're ushered into the very presence of God. God's love will not forsake us nor leave us. And periodically, God shows up in remarkable ways for all of us. Amen.